Evelyn Parker arrived at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport just as the sky was turning pearly pink. She walked through the swinging glass doors with measured calm, carrying only a slim leather folio under her arm. Even at 65, she moved with the poise of someone who had spent a lifetime in boardrooms and conference halls. Her tailored navy blazer fit comfortably over a soft white blouse, and her simple loafers clicked gently on the polished tile. She had chosen a minimalist look on purpose. Evelyn believed that true influence needed no flashy labels or designer logos. Substance always outweighed style. As she wound through the bustling terminal, she felt a flicker of anticipation. Today, she would experience the very service of the airline she was about to transform. She reminded herself to pay close attention, to note every courteous detail and every flaw, so that she could improve the experience for future passengers. If only she knew just how intensely she would be tested. She recalled the first time she ever flew first class. It had been on a trip to London when she was in her mid-30s and working for a small investment firm. She remembered the hush of the cabin, the soft glow of reading lights, and the clink of crystal glasses. That memory had felt like a promise of things to come. Over the years, she had earned her way into executive suites, board seats, and exclusive clubs. She had learned to navigate high-stakes negotiations and to read people's intentions before they even spoke a word. Respect was something she built with her choices, her integrity, and her unwavering calm under pressure. Yet no amount of past victories could prepare her for the subtle undercurrent of bias she felt today. At the check-in counter, the agent greeted her with a practiced smile. Evelyn gave her name and handed over her passport. The agent's eyes flickered to the screen and then back to Evelyn's gentle gaze. "Your seat in first class is confirmed, Miss Parker," she said, tapping the keyboard. "No special treatment, no extra fanfare." Evelyn paid the difference without a word. She wanted to see the true spirit of this airline, not a curated performance put on for VIPs. As she signed off on the final screen, she felt a small thrill. Soon she would settle into that plush leather seat by the window and take in every nuance of the service. The boarding area filled quickly. Families hugged at the gate, business travelers typed on laptops, and children tugged at parents' sleeves. An announcement crackled through the speakers calling first class and priority boarding. Evelyn folded her folio neatly under her arm and stepped forward. The moment she crossed the threshold onto the jet bridge, she inhaled the faint scent of jet fuel mixed with coffee. That combination always reminded her of beginnings and departures, of possibilities at 35,000 feet. She paused for a moment to smooth her skirt, took a steadying breath, and reminded herself, observe and learn. When she stepped into the cabin, she offered a warm nod to the flight attendant who greeted her. Above her hung soft golden lighting and the seats were arranged like leather thrones. Evelyn chose seat 3A, nestled by the window, and settled in. A flight attendant named Michael appeared almost instantly with a welcoming smile. He handed her a chilled glass of orange juice and introduced himself quietly. Michael asked how she was today, and Evelyn thanked him, letting a bit of genuine warmth shine through. For a few seconds, everything felt exactly as she had hoped. Gracious, attentive, unobtrusive. And then Vanessa Cole entered the scene. Vanessa was tall and impeccably turned out in her tailored uniform. Her hair was pulled into a perfect chignon, and her name tag glinted under the cabin lights. Evelyn could see the pride in Vanessa's posture. She clearly loved her role and took it seriously. But as soon as Vanessa's gaze swept past Michael's friendly ease and rested on Evelyn, something changed. The warmth in Vanessa's eyes froze over into cool scrutiny. Evelyn braced herself, reminding herself to stay composed. Vanessa approached slowly and cleared her throat softly. "Good morning, ma'am," she said, her voice bright but brittle. "Would you mind showing me your boarding pass again?" Evelyn blinked in surprise. She reached for her phone, tapped the screen, and held up the digital pass. Vanessa leaned in as though looking for a hidden watermark. Evelyn kept her expression neutral. After what felt like a long moment, Vanessa flicked her eyes away and gave a curt nod. "We will be taking off shortly." Then she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving the quiet echo of her heels behind. Evelyn exhaled gently and let her shoulders drop. She reminded herself that sometimes high-achieving women had to endure petty tests. She lifted her mouth into a small smile and scanned the cabin. Most of the other first-class passengers were absorbed in their own worlds. A businessman flipping through a newspaper, a mother adjusting her child's neck pillow, an elderly couple admiring the view outside. No one else seemed to notice the tension that had crackled in that brief exchange. When the seatbelt sign clicked on and the engines rumbled to life, Evelyn closed her eyes and breathed as steadily as she could. Her mother used to tell her, "Kill them with kindness, baby. Let your grace speak louder than their bias." She repeated those words quietly in her mind. She reminded herself that judicious calm could be more disarming than any argument. Above all, she would remain measured and dignified. Once cruising altitude was reached, the cabin lights brightened and Michael returned with a warm towel. Evelyn accepted it gratefully, feeling the soft cloth against her palms. She set the folio aside and leaned back, ready for the meal service. Minutes later, Vanessa reappeared, pushing a gleaming cart of fine china and polished silverware. She served the passenger in 1A with a cheerful flourish, and then the passenger in 2C with light conversation about the sports headlines that afternoon. Evelyn watched as Vanessa moved from seat to seat with practiced ease. When Vanessa reached Evelyn's row, her entire demeanor changed. She placed the tray down with a faint clatter, her voice cold and clipped. "Is there something I can get you?" Evelyn smiled politely and said, "I would appreciate a glass of water and the chicken entree, please." Vanessa's lips pressed into a line as she pushed a plate of grilled rosemary chicken breast, fingerling potatoes and a crisp green salad toward Evelyn. "You're welcome," she said, and strode away without another word. Evelyn felt a ripple of shock. It was not the brusque delivery that hurt so much as the deliberate contrast to the warmth Vanessa had shown others. She lifted the fork, cut a small piece of chicken, and let the savory aroma remind her why she had chosen first class in the first place. She was here to assess service standards, and yet she could feel the weight of Vanessa's disdain settling over her meal like a dark cloud. She opened her conference memo on her tablet, skimming a section about inclusive passenger experiences. The memo spoke of empathy, building trust, and how every passenger should feel welcomed. Evelyn wanted to laugh at the irony. She tapped her finger against the screen and shook her head. Even in her seasoned career, she had never encountered such thinly veiled bias. She forced herself to focus on the screen, to jot notes on what might be improved, but her mind kept drifting back to Vanessa's narrowed eyes. Soon, Evelyn realized she needed to use the restroom. She rose gracefully and began to slip past Vanessa's cart, only to find Vanessa directly in her path. Very quietly, Vanessa said, "Passengers in first class typically use the front lavatory near row 1. She gestured toward the front. Evelyn paused and explained kindly, "I apologize if I am mistaken, but I thought both the front and mid-cabin restrooms are available to first-class passengers." Vanessa's face hardened. "I am just making sure everything runs smoothly. Please use the mid-cabin one." She gave Evelyn a small push toward the aisle, just enough to feel humiliating. Evelyn's cheeks warmed. She nodded and walked on, keeping her head high. She made a mental note. Signage at the front lavatory could be clearer. She chided herself for letting the emotion flare. After all, her role was to remain objective. But being treated like a problem to be managed cut deeper than any policy violation. Back in her seat, Evelyn saw Michael watching from across the aisle. He gave her a subtle, sympathetic nod. She returned it with gratitude. He could not intervene. Vanessa was the senior attendant, but his concern meant something. Evelyn leaned back and let the cabin's low hum soothe her. Outside the window, the sky had turned a deeper shade of rose, and she found a quiet moment's beauty in the view. She took a sip of her water, tasted the crisp ice, and reminded herself, observe with care, report with clarity. A little later, Vanessa appeared again, this time to announce dessert. She leaned close and said in a stiff whisper, "Ma'am, we are about to serve dessert. I need you to raise your seat to upright for service." Evelyn looked around. Several other passengers still had their seats reclined. She met Vanessa's challenge and said softly, "I noticed that some seats remain reclined. Is there a specific policy requiring mine to be upright first?" Vanessa's cheeks flushed. "This is standard protocol," she snapped. "No questions allowed." Evelyn felt the sting of injustice bloom in her chest. She took another breath, slower this time. She had choices in how to respond. She could submit to the silent humiliation again, or she could speak up. She looked directly at Vanessa and said, "Vanessa, may I speak with you for a moment?" Vanessa crossed her arms and asked, "Is there a problem?" Evelyn steadied her voice. "If I have done anything to offend, I would like to know so I can correct it." The cabin grew hushed as the other first-class passengers sensed the tension. Every eye felt heavy on them both. Michael hovered nearby, clearly torn. He had the duty to follow protocol, but also the instinct to shield Evelyn from this unfair treatment. He offered her a quick thumbs up. Evelyn gave him a slight smile of thanks. Then she turned back to Vanessa and spoke clearly, "I paid for this seat just like everyone else. I expect the same courtesy and respect." At that moment, she felt every ounce of her 50 years of experience press her forward. She was calm but resolute. Vanessa opened her mouth as if to protest, but the words caught in her throat when she saw the firmness in Evelyn's eyes. The whispers among the passengers grew softer, the cabin's murmur shifting into a tense silence. No one moved. Evelyn allowed a small, gracious smile to curve her lips. "Thank you for understanding," she said quietly. Then she returned her attention to the window, letting the last rays of sunlight bathe her in soft glow. For a moment, Vanessa just stood there. Then she took a small step back, visibly unbalancing. Her eyes widened and she let out a faint gasp. Before anyone could react, her knees buckled and she sank to the floor in a faint. Michael and a nearby passenger hurried to her side while Evelyn remained seated, heart pounding but expression composed. A flight attendant's voice called for medical assistance over the intercom. Evelyn watched as the cabin crew attended to Vanessa, her mind racing. In that charged instant, Evelyn felt the weight of what had just happened settle around her like a curtain. She saw the astonished faces of her fellow passengers, the same ones who had watched her be dismissed and questioned. Now they watched as the powerful attendant lay crumpled in the aisle. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly and whispered to herself, "Thank you, Mama, for teaching me grace under fire." When the attendants finally helped Vanessa back to her feet and escorted her toward the galley to recover, the cabin was strangely still. Passengers returned to their seats with wary glances at Evelyn, as though waiting for her next move. Evelyn sat for a heartbeat longer, then reached for her folio. She thumbed open a blank page in her notebook and wrote at the top, "Service Observation Report." Then she added a single bullet, "Lead by kindness and firm respect," and she tapped her pen thoughtfully. This was exactly the kind of scenario she had hoped to discover, raw, unvarnished, and real. The unfairness she had experienced would inform every recommendation she made. She would use this moment to ensure that the airline's new leadership cultivated genuine empathy among staff. No more silent biases, no more petty power plays. She would transform this culture from the inside out. Evelyn leaned back, picked up her water glass and smiled quietly to herself. The journey had only just begun, and already she could feel change taking flight. Evelyn Parker sat rigidly in her plush first-class seat as the cabin lights dimmed to a soft amber glow. Her heart pulsed like a steady drumbeat in her chest, every fiber of her being alert to the cold tension lingering in the air. Vanessa Cole, the senior flight attendant, stood in the galley doorway with her arms crossed, face taut as she glared down the aisle. It was clear that Evelyn's mere presence unsettled Vanessa, and the hostess wore that discomfort like a badge of honor, rather than a source of shame. Vanessa's tone sliced through the hush. "I've received complaints from other first-class passengers regarding your disruptive behavior," she announced, voice crisp and controlled. The implication felt like ice water flooding Evelyn's veins. Disruptive behavior. Evelyn's mind flashed back to every moment Vanessa had shadowed her, every wary glance, every clipped instruction. And she felt a flush of indignation rise in her cheeks. Disruptive behavior? Evelyn repeated, voice calm but incredulous. From whom? She kept her gaze steady on Vanessa's face, refusing to let the attendant's intimidation tactics undermine her composure. People had complained, she had been nothing but polite. Vanessa's eyes flicked away as though she feared Evelyn's unwavering stare. It does not matter who, she snapped. The fact is that you have been up and down the aisle, ignoring my instructions and rummaging around. The attendant's words dripped with condescension, her arms tightening across her chest. When Evelyn recalled bending to retrieve her phone, it suddenly felt like a criminal act. A bead of sweat formed at Evelyn's hairline. She took a deep, silent breath, summoning every ounce of poise she possessed. I paid for this seat, she said steadily. I have not caused a disturbance. She let each word settle in the air before the next. Her tone held no tremor. She refused to betray the storm of emotions swirling inside. About 30 minutes later, Evelyn felt the cabin jostle gently as the pilot adjusted course. That slight turbulence gave Vanessa a new pretext. The attendant reappeared in the aisle near Evelyn's seat, her expression unreadable. "Ma'am," she said in a clipped whisper, "I need you to come with me to the front galley now." Evelyn's pulse quickened again, but she rose calmly, smoothing her skirt and lifting her chin. She walked down the aisle, each step measured, every eye in first class tracking her progress. A few passengers offered hesitant smiles of encouragement, while others stared in stunned silence. The cabin's soft lighting cast long shadows that flickered like ghosts along the walls as Evelyn passed. At the galley doorway, Evelyn paused and drew in a steadying breath. The galley was cramped. 2 stainless steel counters, rows of neatly stacked dishes, a coffee maker hissing softly. Vanessa stood beneath the overhead bins, arms crossed, as though she had claimed that modest space for her own personal courtroom. Vanessa's gaze was unflinching. "I've decided that if you cannot adhere to first-class protocol, I will ask you to move to economy, or if necessary, remove you from the plane at our next stop," she said, voice as cold as steel. Evelyn felt the words reverberate inside her ribcage. Remove her. The idea was absurd, unconscionable. Evelyn's throat tightened, but she kept her voice calm and level. "Why am I being singled out?" she asked, gesturing toward her seat. "I paid for this ticket just like everyone else. I have followed every instruction, except when those instructions were never given to me." Vanessa's expression flickered, as though Evelyn's logic caught her off guard. "I do not have to explain further," Vanessa replied stiffly. "This is your final warning." She turned and swept back into the cabin, leaving Evelyn alone in the galley, with nothing but the steady hum of the engines for company. Evelyn traced a fingertip along the edge of the countertop, feeling the cool smoothness beneath her touch. She closed her eyes and let out a slow exhale. Her heart still thundered in her ears, but she reminded herself of her purpose. She was here to observe, to learn, and if necessary, to retaliate in a way that could not be ignored. She returned to her seat, slipping quietly into the leather embrace of her chair. The older woman in 4A gave her a sympathetic nod, and Michael offered a brief, supportive smile from across the aisle. Evelyn allowed herself a small, thankful smile in return, then reached into her folio for her notebook. She flipped to a blank page and wrote in neat script, "Threat to downgrade or remove passenger with no basis. Open racial hostility. Witness intervention by first-class passenger. Michael's silent support." She noted the time, approximately 14:45, and closed the notebook, tucking it safely away. Evelyn leaned back and closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the steady rhythm of the plane's flight fill her senses. She told herself that the rest of the flight would pass without further incident, but even as she thought it, A flicker of doubt crossed her mind. Moments later, a soft chime sounded as the older black woman in seat 4B pressed her call button. Evelyn watched as Michael hurried over, concern etched in his features. The woman spoke quietly but firmly. "I would like to file a complaint regarding the treatment of the passenger in 3A. Would you please note the attendant's name?" Michael's brow furrowed as he glanced at Vanessa, who hovered a few feet away. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said in a low voice. "I cannot share personal information." "But her name is Ms. Cole," he added quietly. "You may include that in your complaint." The woman nodded, her expression composed and dignified. When Michael stepped away, the cabin felt charged again. Vanessa's face went pale, her confidence shaken by the formal complaint. She retreated into the galley, her shoulders slumped, as though a great weight pressed down on her. The cabin's atmosphere shifted. Passengers exchanged whispers of support, casting discreet glances at Evelyn. She felt a surge of gratitude and strength. This silent coalition of witnesses gave her courage she hadn't known she needed. Evelyn allowed herself to lean forward and breathe in the soft scent of lavender soap from the flight attendant's towels. She considered drafting an email to the airline's board immediately, but she wanted to see if Vanessa would truly escalate matters further before revealing her own hand. A sudden announcement crackled through the PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have received a report of a passenger disturbance in first class. If this situation cannot be resolved quickly, we may need to divert. Thank you for your cooperation." Evelyn felt her chest tighten. The threat of diversion was a blunt instrument, one that could cause genuine panic or delay. She knew Vanessa must have gone to the cockpit to escalate the issue, yet she felt an unexpected flash of pity for the attendant. Even the powerful could tremble when confronted with repercussions. Vanessa re-emerged from the galley, her cadence stiff as she crossed the aisle. "Ma'am," she said to Evelyn, voice amplified enough to carry to rows 1 and 2. "You must gather your belongings and come with me to the front. The time for warnings is over. I have too many complaints to ignore." Evelyn's breath caught. She stood, her spine straight, meeting Vanessa's stare without flinching. "I apologize for any inconvenience," she said, voice carrying softly but firmly. "I have done nothing to disturb this flight or its passengers." She looked around, letting her words sink in among the gathered onlookers. The older woman in 4A folded her arms. The man in 3B shook his head in disapproval. Michael lingered in the aisle, uncertain but clearly sympathetic. Vanessa's face hardened. "If you refuse, I will have no choice but to have security remove you at our next stop," she said. Evelyn swallowed, her pulse raging. Security removal. The very thought felt like a line drawn in the sky. She pressed her lips together, then exhaled slowly. "Very well," she said, stepping toward the galley. "I will come with you, but first, I need to clarify something." Her voice was calm, even gentle, but held an unmistakable steel. She faced Vanessa and said, "I am the majority shareholder of this airline, soon to assume full control of Silverwing Air." The cabin fell silent as her words echoed among the seats. Vanessa froze, her eyes widening like saucers. The gold pin on her uniform caught the light, shimmering as though in disbelief. A collective gasp rippled through first class. The man in 4A sat forward, jaw dropped. Michael's hand flew to his mouth in astonishment. "Yes, Miss Cole," Evelyn continued. "I paid for this ticket under my own name. I wanted to experience the service firsthand before assuming leadership. But your conduct has exposed a troubling culture that must change." She withdrew her phone from her purse and tapped through to her email app, opening a message thread from the board of directors. She scrolled slowly, revealing the signed letter of intent confirming her majority ownership. Passengers leaned forward to glimpse the digital document. Signatures, corporate seals, timestamps. A low hum of astonishment filled the cabin. Even Vanessa's posture slackened, her arms dropping to her sides. Her face went pale, as though the blood had drained away. "This is not a trick," Evelyn said, voice steady. "It is a matter of record and necessity that I address this prejudice. I offered you the benefit of anonymity, Ms. Cole, but your actions left me no choice." The cabin remained hushed, every passenger transfixed. Vanessa's lips trembled. I am so sorry," she stammered. "I did not know." She took a trembling step forward, but Evelyn raised a hand in a gesture of gentle forgiveness. "There is much to discuss," she said kindly, "but not in front of passengers. Let us resolve this professionally once we land." Vanessa nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I understand, Miss Parker," she whispered. "I will cooperate fully." A ripple of relief passed through the cabin. Michael closed his mouth with a satisfied click and approached Evelyn with a respectful nod. The older woman in 4A offered a proud smile. Evelyn returned their gestures with genuine warmth. As the plane descended toward Los Angeles, the hush of tension was replaced by a sense of hopeful possibility. Evelyn Parker had weathered Vanessa Cole's hostility with grace and quiet determination. Now more than ever, she was resolved to lead Silverwing Air toward a future of real respect, genuine inclusion, and kindness in every cabin, from first class to economy. Evelyn Parker stepped forward into the first-class cabin under a soft glow of overhead lights as passengers raised their phones to capture the moment. The hush that fell when she revealed her identity still lingered, but now it held an undercurrent of triumph rather than tension. Carlotta's face had drained of color, the carefully controlled composure replaced by panic. Her lips quivered as she searched for words. She stammered, voice barely above a whisper. "I thought you did not belong in first class. Your ticket raised suspicion." Evelyn's chest tightened with both anger and pity. She leveled her calm gaze on Carlotta. "It is because I am a black woman, isn't it?" she asked softly. Carlotta's mouth opened and closed, halting on the edge of denial, but no words came that could hide her bias. Evelyn took a measured breath and said, "It is done. We will address the repercussions once we land. For now, please step aside." Carlotta's shoulders slumped in defeat, and she stepped out of Evelyn's path, her uniform rustling as she moved toward the galley. All around them, first-class passengers exhaled and began to murmur in relief and admiration. Michael, the junior flight attendant, hurried forward with a fresh glass of water and a heartfelt apology. "I am so sorry, Miss Parker," he said, eyes downcast. His tone was sincere, and Evelyn accepted the water with a small nod. Other passengers leaned forward from their seats to offer words of encouragement. One elderly gentleman tapped his armrest and said softly, "You handled that with grace, ma'am." That simple affirmation warmed her more than any drink could. Meanwhile, Carlotta stood just inside the galley, her face pale, hands trembling as she fumbled with her in-flight communications panel. She dialed the cockpit, likely calling the captain to report a disturbance, her panic evident in every flustered motion. Evelyn watched from her seat as Carlotta's head dipped and rose, her eyes glossy with regret. Or was it shame? The distinction was almost irrelevant now. The damage had been done, and Carlotta would have to live with the consequences. The rest of the flight carried on in an uneasy calm. The seatbelt sign flicked off, and Michael and the two junior attendants resumed their service with renewed cordiality. They offered pastries and soft drinks to the other passengers. Their efficiency mingled with a genuine concern every time they glanced at Evelyn's row. Evelyn herself declined further service. She needed the quiet to process what had happened, and to prepare for the steps she would take upon landing. Evelyn opened the Notes app on her phone and began drafting a report to Silverwing Air's board. She documented every instance of discrimination, noting times, seat numbers, and witness names. She wrote about the intimidation when Carlotta had demanded her boarding pass again, the forced deviation to the mid-cabin lavatory, the unjust warnings about reclining her seat, and finally the threat to downgrade or remove her altogether. She noted how fellow passengers in seats 3B, 4A, and 4B had intervened or offered support. With each detail she typed, she felt a growing sense of purpose. This was no longer just her story. It was the beginning of company-wide reform. As the aircraft descended toward Los Angeles, the cabin lights brightened and voices rose in anticipation of landing. A polite round of applause greeted the wheels touching down, but Evelyn remained seated for a moment, letting the applause wash over her. She drew her shoulders back and tucked her notebook away. It was time to face the next chapter of her plan. When the seatbelt sign clicked off, Evelyn rose slowly, her posture regal. A few passengers offered handshakes and sincere smiles. "I stand by you," one woman said, her eyes shining. Evelyn thanked her with a nod and a warm smile, feeling a swell of gratitude. All around her were witnesses who would later back her testimony. As she neared the exit, Carlotta stood by the door, head bowed, hands clasped tightly at her waist. Evelyn paused a few steps away, their eyes meeting in a moment charged with emotion. Evelyn's voice was gentle but firm when she said, "I hope you understand how painful your actions were." Carlotta's bottom lip trembled, and tears shone in her eyes as she whispered, "I am sorry, I was wrong." Evelyn inclined her head in acknowledgement. "We will address this fairly," she said softly, "but I cannot overlook what happened." Then she turned and walked down the aisle toward the jet bridge, leaving Carlotta enveloped in her own remorse. Outside the plane, the terminal buzzed with the usual rush of passengers, but Evelyn made her way directly to the private executive lounge. A Silver Wing Air assistant was waiting, having been discreetly alerted to her arrival. "Ms. Parker, we received word from Michael," the assistant said with concern. "Are you all right?" Evelyn offered a small, wry smile. "I am fine, mostly. We need to address what happened immediately." In a plush corner of the lounge, David Martinez, the local station manager, and Emily Jacobs, the HR liaison, greeted Evelyn within minutes. She sat in a deep leather armchair as they took seats across from her, expressions solemn. Evelyn recounted every detail: Carlotta's suspicious glances, the repeated challenges to her right to recline her seat, the formal warnings, the threat of removal, and finally the stunned apology when her identity was revealed. Emily's pen flew across her notepad, and David's face registered genuine remorse. Evelyn nodded slowly. "Your actions could have humiliated me, or forced the plane to divert. If I had responded differently, that situation might have escalated beyond control." Carlotta's shoulders shook as she said, "I understand. I take full responsibility. My family depends on my work, and I will do whatever it takes to make amends." Emily cleared her throat. "Ms. Parker, discrimination such as this typically requires formal disciplinary action, which may include suspension or termination depending on severity." Evelyn considered the matter, recalling both the pain inflicted and Carlotta's genuine remorse. She believed in second chances, when appropriate, especially if they came with real learning. "I do not want to destroy your career," Evelyn said at last, voice firm yet compassionate. "You will be suspended without pay while you complete comprehensive diversity and inclusion training. You will also receive a final written warning. Any further misconduct will result in termination." Carlotta nodded vigorously, tears still in her eyes. "Thank you, I am truly sorry." Evelyn offered a small, understanding smile. "I accept your apology, but I expect you to reflect deeply on how you treat passengers. Let this be a turning point in your career." Emily documented the decision as Evelyn had outlined: suspension without pay, mandatory training, and a final warning. Evelyn felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Justice had been served, but it also carried the promise of real change. After the meeting, Evelyn returned to the lounge where David Martinez waited. He approached her with an apologetic expression. "Ms. Parker, on behalf of Silver Wing Air, I offer my sincerest apologies. If you wish to issue any formal statement or press release, we are ready to assist." Evelyn raised a hand politely. "I prefer to handle this internally for now. We must seize this incident as a training opportunity. Please begin drafting a comprehensive anti-discrimination and unconscious bias program for all staff. And please locate Michael, she added. He was exceptionally professional and respectful. I want to commend him in his personnel file. David nodded and promised action. Evelyn paused at the window overlooking the bustling tarmac where planes taxied under the warm Los Angeles sun. She felt a renewed determination to ensure Silver Wing Air became a leader in inclusive service. Later that evening, Evelyn checked into her hotel room and sank onto the bed, exhaustion washing over her. She retrieved her phone and sent a brief summary to her parents, omitting the more sensitive details but conveying the outcome. Her mother's advice echoed in her mind. Stand tall, but do not let anger consume you. A flurry of messages from board members popped up. Evelyn calmly replied to all. Yes, the in-flight situation was resolved. Let us convene tomorrow morning to finalize staff training and public communications. Exhausted but resolute, she turned off her phone and closed her eyes. Images of Carlotta's regret and the support of passengers dancing behind her eyelids. The next morning, bright and early, Evelyn convened with Silver Wing Air's executive board in a sleek conference room overlooking downtown Los Angeles. CEO James Carter rose to greet her with an uneasy handshake. Evelyn launched into her recap, detailing every moment of discrimination and the steps taken. She outlined her vision for a stronger, more empathetic culture, mandatory bias training, a clear incident reporting process, and visible support for passengers of every background. Board members listened attentively, occasionally exchanging solemn nods. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before James Carter spoke. We are deeply grateful for your leadership, Ms. Parker. We will implement your recommendations immediately. Evelyn offered a small smile. I expect nothing less, and let us recognize Michael publicly. His integrity set the tone for how this situation could have been far worse. The meeting concluded with a sense of shared purpose. Evelyn left the boardroom feeling both tired and invigorated. She had weathered the storm of prejudice on Flight 217 and turned it into a catalyst for change. As she stepped into the Los Angeles sunshine, she knew her work had only just begun. But she also knew that, with conviction, grace, and firm resolve, Silver Wing Air could become a place where every passenger felt they truly belonged. As the last board members filed out of the conference room, Evelyn remained seated for a few moments, allowing the gravity of the afternoon's decisions to settle. Outside the tinted glass door, the hum of Los Angeles traffic drifted upward. Inwardly, she reviewed her own opening remarks, the precise wording she had chosen to describe the harm done and the change required. She had spoken without anger, yet with unshakable resolve. That balance of firmness and compassion would guide the reforms she now set in motion. Later that day, the executive assistant delivered a draft of the formal press release to Evelyn's inbox. She opened the document on her tablet and scrolled through the polished language. It began by acknowledging the recent in-flight incident, affirmed the airline's commitment to providing respectful service to every passenger, and announced the suspension and mandatory training of the attendant involved. It quoted her statement, "The standards of Silver Wing Air must reflect our values of inclusion, fairness, and dignity for all," and included a promise to launch a comprehensive diversity and inclusion initiative by the end of the quarter. Evelyn tapped a few edits, softening the corporate tone to ensure sincerity. She adjusted, "It is our top priority to treasure each customer's dignity." To read, "At Silver Wing Air, we cherish every customer's dignity and are committed to learning from our mistakes." She added a section expressing gratitude to the passengers and crew whose quick support had helped de-escalate the situation. She signed off with her official title, Evelyn Parker, incoming majority shareholder, Silver Wing Air. With the press release approved, Evelyn and James Carter appeared together via video conference with the communications team. Evelyn explained why transparency mattered and how admitting fault could strengthen public trust. She emphasized that any attempt to minimize or hide the issue would backfire. Carter nodded in agreement. emphasizing that this moment was an opportunity to demonstrate true leadership rather than spin. By the time the message went live on the airline's website, social media channels, and distributed to travel trade publications, Evelyn felt confident that Silverwing Air was taking responsibility in a way that would resonate with both employees and customers. The next morning, Evelyn traveled back to the Silverwing Air Training Center on the outskirts of Atlanta. Her schedule called for an inaugural session of the new Diversity and Inclusion program. The facility was a converted hangar with bright modular classrooms and interactive workstations. She walked through the main lobby where large posters proclaimed, "We believe every passenger matters," and "Stand up, speak up, respect wins." Employees greeting her in small groups smiled and offered polite nods. There was a palpable buzz of curiosity and cautious optimism. In the first classroom, a group of 20 flight attendants sat in a semicircle. They ranged from recent hires to cabin managers with decades of experience. The director of training, Carla Nguyen, introduced Evelyn to start the session. Evelyn took the front lectern and scanned the room. She began by recounting, without naming names, a story that many of them already knew was her own experience disguised as a case study. She described the feeling of being underestimated, judged, and excluded for reasons beyond one's control. She spoke of the courage it had required to remain calm and the compassion shown by those who intervened. Then she closed the story by saying, "If we allow bias to dictate our actions, we betray the trust our passengers place in us. Each of you has the power to lift someone up or tear them down with a single choice." 2 weeks later, Evelyn returned to the training center to check in on Carlotta's progress. She found her alone in a reflection room, a gentle space filled with plants and soft chairs. Carlotta looked up, eyes red but steady. She offered a tentative smile. "I have done a lot of self-work these past days and confronted attitudes I did not know I had," she said. "I feel ashamed but also grateful for this chance to learn." Evelyn nodded. "I believe change happens when we face our own shadows and commit to do better," she replied. "You have done the hard work. We will confirm your return to duty when you demonstrate consistent, positive behavior." Carlotta's shoulders relaxed and she breathed deeply. "Thank you for believing in me," she said softly. In the months that followed, the new diversity curriculum rolled out to all frontline employees, managers, and support staff. Evelyn instituted quarterly town halls where employees could share experiences and suggest further improvements. She introduced a confidential reporting app, allowing passengers and crew to flag incidents non-judgmentally. Senior leaders received training in inclusive leadership and were held accountable through performance metrics tied to passenger feedback scores. Evelyn also visited several major airports where Silverwing operated to meet ground staff, customer service agents, and gate personnel. She listened to their insights about how bias could appear even before a customer boarded a plane. She learned that uniform display policies sometimes alienated cultural or religious attire and immediately tasked the design team to propose inclusive uniform options. By the end of the first year under Evelyn's leadership, Silverwing Air's internal surveys showed a marked improvement in employee engagement and passenger satisfaction. Publicly, the airline was praised by travel writers for its bold stance on inclusion and by consumer advocacy groups for its transparency in handling discrimination claims. Industry awards followed for best customer experience and airline social responsibility. Evelyn often reflected on how a single flight from Atlanta to Los Angeles had catalyzed such sweeping reforms. What had begun as an ordinary trip had revealed deep-seated attitudes that required bold action. She felt gratitude toward the many passengers who had spoken up to support her at 35,000 feet, and toward Michael and the junior attendants who had shown compassion in a tense moment. Late one afternoon, as she reviewed the latest customer feedback, Evelyn's phone buzzed with a text from the elderly gentleman who had offered encouragement in first class. He wrote, "Thank you for restoring my faith in air travel. Safe flights always go beyond safety checks." She typed back, "Thank you for your kindness and for helping me stand up." It was a reminder that leadership was not just about title or power, but about shared humanity. In her office overlooking the runway, she watched a silver-wing jet taxi into position. Soon it would carry hundreds of passengers to their destinations with a renewed promise of dignity and respect. Evelyn Parker felt a deep satisfaction that the airline she would soon call her own had become a model for service rooted in empathy. She knew the work would never truly end, but for now she allowed herself a moment of pride. Before leaving the office, she added a new line to her personal mission statement posted by her desk. "Every passenger deserves to be treated with unwavering courtesy and fairness." Then she closed her laptop, turned off the lights, and walked down the quiet corridor toward the elevator. The future of Silverwing Air was bright, not just because of the planes lined up on the tarmac, but because the people who served and the passengers who boarded did so with mutual respect and trust. And in that simple truth, Evelyn found her greatest hope for the journeys yet to come. Evelyn folded her notes on the table and took a steadying breath as she addressed the board one more time. The air in the sleek conference room felt charged with purpose. "Discrimination in any form undermines trust," she began, her voice warm yet firm. "If it could happen to me, an unnoticed majority shareholder, it could happen to any passenger. We need unambiguous policies and robust training to protect every traveler, from first class to economy." Heads around the polished oak table nodded in agreement. Evelyn leaned forward, palms lightly pressed together. "First, all staff, cabin crew, ground personnel, customer service agents will undergo mandatory diversity and sensitivity training designed by leading experts. We cannot rely on good intentions alone. Next, we will launch an anonymous feedback platform so that passengers can report incidents without fear of repercussion. Finally, a zero-tolerance policy on discrimination must be codified in our employee handbook and enforced without exception." CEO Martin gave her a full-throated endorsement. "We're behind you 100%, he said, smiling. That afternoon marked the formal beginning of 40 weeks of cultural transformation at Silverwing Air. Evelyn's first order of business was to collaborate with human resources consultants to draft clear guidelines emphasizing fair treatment in every cabin. She worked late into the evening reviewing recommended lesson plans, interactive workshops, and role-play scenarios that would challenge unconscious assumptions. Television screens in the hallway replayed news clips praising the airline's swift response, but Evelyn paid them little mind. Her focus was on depth, not headlines. Over the next few days, the marketing team unveiled a refreshed brand identity. Gone were the sterile stock photos. In their place were vibrant images of passengers from all walks of life, smiling in uniform cabins. On the terminals, banners now read "Every passenger matters" and "Travel with dignity." Uniform designers presented sketches for a new flight attendant ensemble, classic navy silhouettes accented with soft pastel scarves that subtly echoed the diversity of Silverwing's routes, from Honolulu's hibiscus blossoms to New Orleans's jazz-inspired patterns. Evelyn gave her enthusiastic approval, noting that small touches can communicate inclusion as powerfully as any memo. Meanwhile, word of Carlotta's suspension rippled through the staff grapevine. Some longtime employees murmured that she had always carried herself with an imperious air, especially toward passengers who didn't fit a certain mold. Evelyn chose not to identify her by name in official communications, referring only to an incident of serious misconduct, yet everyone knew whom she meant, and they understood the clear message. Even the highest-ranking crew members must abide by our standards of respect. Evelyn then embarked on a tour of key Silverwing hubs. In Denver, she met gate agents who shared stories of anxious travelers. In Miami, she sat down with baggage handlers who recounted long days in sweltering heat. In Seattle, she joined a ground crew huddle before dawn. Everywhere she went, she listened with intent, taking notes on morale, service bottlenecks, and the subtle ways bias could seep into everyday decisions. At a staff cafeteria in Chicago, a young black hostess confided that she sometimes felt unwelcome introducing herself to first-class guests. Evelyn thanked her and vowed to raise the issue in every leadership meeting. Back at corporate headquarters in Atlanta, her childhood home turned gleaming glass tower, Evelyn convened a town hall meeting for all administrative and operational staff. She opened with candor. "Recently, one of our own nearly removed me from a first-class seat purely because of my appearance." While painful, that moment sparked a vital conversation about empathy and accountability. The room was silent as she spoke, then erupted into applause. A young black flight attendant raised her hand to say she had faced microaggressions from colleagues and never known where to turn. Evelyn replied softly, "No one should feel silenced. We are building safe channels for reporting discrimination. Stand with us and we'll stand with you," she declared, and the auditorium thundered with approval. Evelyn felt tears spring to her eyes as the energy shifted. What had been an unspoken problem was now front and center, and she was committed to sustaining that momentum. In the weeks that followed, Silverwing's public relations team deftly managed the narrative. Tabloids had seized on headlines like "Black Woman Secretly Buys Major Airlines Shocking In-Flight Showdown." But the PR release reframed the story. Lauren Harris's leadership had sparked meaningful change. Evelyn granted one carefully crafted interview to a respected business journal, emphasizing that the airline industry must respect every customer, irrespective of background or appearance. "I had a personal experience that highlighted the need for improvement," she said, "and we are making real progress." Social media responses poured in, passengers sharing their positive experiences under the hashtag Safe Skies for All. As Silverwing rolled out its new training program, Carlotta's case remained a central example, though anonymized, in workshops on unconscious bias and respectful communication. Carlotta herself completed 2 weeks of intensive sessions on microaggressions, active listening, and empathy building. Each module confronted the idea that a single prejudiced interaction could undermine an entire brand's promise. Midway through, Carlotta confessed in a one-on-one coaching session that she had let her insecurities guide her, and that Evelyn's calm correction felt more generous than punitive. She wept as she admitted, "I never realized how deeply my own fears could harm another person." Evelyn visited her again at the training center's reflection room, a quiet space with soft chairs and potted plants. She found Carlotta seated alone, shoulders slumped, but eyes steady. "I have done a lot of hard work to confront my blind spots," Carlotta said. "I am ashamed, but grateful for this chance to learn." Evelyn placed a hand gently on her arm. "Change happens when we face our own shadows," she replied. "You will return to duty when you prove, every day, that you honor our values." Over the next quarter, Evelyn held quarterly town halls and launched an anonymous incident report app that allowed passengers and crew to flag concerns in real time. Senior leaders had their performance evaluated not only on revenue and on-time arrivals, but also on passenger satisfaction scores and the absence of discrimination complaints. Uniform policing revisions went into effect, welcoming variations for cultural and religious attire. Flight hijab pilots were featured in internal videos celebrating diversity. One crisp morning, Evelyn reviewed Silverwing's quarterly reports to find that employee engagement had grown by 18% and discrimination reports had dropped by 75%. Media outlets praised the airline's example. In an op-ed for a travel magazine, a veteran aviation writer declared that Silverwing had set a new gold standard for inclusive air travel. Evelyn allowed herself a small smile. Real progress takes time and persistence. Months later, she returned quietly to the Atlanta-Chicago first-class cabin to test whether the transformation held. Boarding under her own name, she asked simply for a hot towel and coffee. No mention of title or ownership. A friendly attendant named Sarah Bennett greeted her with genuine warmth, treating her just like every other passenger. Other first-class guests of varied races and ages all received the same courteous attention. Evelyn settled into the smooth, sumptuous leather seat, allowing herself a moment of pride. This was exactly the culture she had envisioned. Mid-flight, she asked Sarah about Vanessa Cole. "I haven't seen her on this route," Sarah said. "She was reassigned to a quieter schedule after completing her training, and she's been described as far more considerate these days." Evelyn nodded, heart warmed that even Carlotta had embraced the change. When the jet touched down in Chicago, Evelyn slipped a handwritten note into the feedback box by the cockpit door. "Exceptional warmth and professionalism from Sarah Bennett and all first-class crew. Thank you for making every passenger feel welcome." She paused, closing her eyes as the cabin lights dimmed. Sometimes the simplest recognition can inspire the greatest loyalty. In the terminal, local managers escorted her through a newly redesigned lounge, bright, inviting, emblazoned with signs proclaiming "All are welcome at Silver Wing." Routes were busier than ever, and she overheard travelers praising the airline's refined service. Evelyn's chest swelled with pride. The legacy she had fought to build was coming to life. As she stepped into her waiting car, Evelyn reflected on the journey that began with a humiliating push toward the exit of her own plane. That adversity had forged her into a more determined leader. She whispered to herself, "May we continue to soar higher, together, with respect and kindness at our core." In the months that followed, she launched scholarship programs for underprivileged youth aspiring to aviation careers, partnered with community nonprofits in cities Silver Wing served, and oversaw the successful expansion of new routes and code-share agreements that cemented the airline's competitive standing. At the next annual shareholder meeting, now formally announced as the controlling investor, Evelyn spoke from the stage about both tangible growth, routes added, revenue up, passenger satisfaction soaring, and the intangible victories of morale, inclusivity, and trust. She recounted the first-class story one last time, reminding everyone that assumptions can be shattered and that every individual deserves to be treated with dignity. The audience rose in a spontaneous standing ovation, tears in many eyes. Evelyn Parker bowed her head in gratitude. This was the culmination of her journey, from silent passenger to catalyst for company-wide transformation. She closed by urging every traveler and every employee to stand up when they witness injustice, to speak kindness as boldly as they would demand respect. The applause that followed carried through the grand hall, a resonance of hope and shared purpose. "If my story has moved you," Evelyn would say, "then let it remind you that change often begins with one courageous act." May we all find the strength to rise above bias and champion the dignity of every passenger we serve. As the applause settled in the auditorium and Evelyn Parker stepped back from the podium, the screen behind her faded to soft blue. A gentle voiceover began, speaking directly to the audience, as though from a friendly neighbor sharing a cup of tea. "If Evelyn's story spoke to you," the voice said warmly, "please click the like button below. Your support matters more than you know, because every time you acknowledge a story of fairness and courage, you send a message that kindness still wins in our world." Then, if you've ever witnessed someone being treated unfairly, whether on an airplane, in a grocery line, or any place you call home, remember Evelyn's determination. She chose not to lash out in anger, but to stand firm in compassion and conviction. You have that same power to create change. And if you believe that stories of empathy, justice, and resilience should be heard by more people, please share this video with friends and family. Let them see how one person's courage can spark an entire movement, turning a moment of injustice into a legacy of respect. Finally, if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel. That way you'll stay connected with more inspiring journeys, stories that remind us all that fairness and dignity are the foundation of every community. Hit the subscribe button now and tap the notification bell so you never miss a chance to champion hope and stand up for what is right. With that friendly invitation still echoing, the camera dissolved back to Evelyn's final smile, her eyes bright with hope. The story of one flight, one confrontation, and one woman's unwavering resolve had come full circle, leaving viewers not just informed but empowered to make every cabin, every street, and every neighborhood a place where everyone truly belongs. Evelyn Parker leaned forward and let her gaze sweep across the gathered crowd one more time. She felt the weight of every eye upon her, the anticipation thrumming like electricity in the air. Then she spoke, her voice soft yet resolute. "Discrimination in any form shatters trust. If it could happen to me, an unassuming passenger with a first-class ticket, it could happen to any customer regardless of background or means." With that, she laid out her vision for Silverwing Air's future. She paused, letting the gravity of her words settle. First, every single employee, from gate agents to cleaning crews, must complete mandatory diversity and sensitivity training. This is not a checkbox exercise. It is a chance to unlearn biases we never realized we had, and to build empathy through real-world scenarios. Next, she announced an anonymous feedback platform that would allow passengers to report misconduct without fear. That system would be monitored 24 hours a day, ensuring that no complaint went unheard. Finally, she declared a zero-tolerance policy on discrimination, codifying it in the airline's updated employee handbook. No exceptions, no loopholes. The room broke into applause, the energy palpable. Over the following 40 weeks, Evelyn devoted herself to turning those promises into reality. She worked side by side with leading human resources experts to craft clear, actionable guidelines that prioritized respect in every interaction. The marketing team rebranded Silverwing's image with bright, welcoming art that showcased passengers from every walk of life, and she quietly championed a redesign of the flight attendant uniform, replacing the stark navy with softer tones and optional scarves inspired by landmarks from across America, from New Orleans' jazz poo to San Francisco's pastel fog. Meanwhile, word of Carlotta's suspension spread among the crew. Some whispered that she had always carried an air of superiority, especially around passengers who did not match her narrow expectations. Evelyn chose to keep Carlotta's name out of her public statements, referring only to a serious incident of misconduct. Yet everyone knew what that meant. They also knew that she would be returning only after rigorous training and a demonstration of genuine change. Evelyn embarked on a tour of Silverwing's major hubs. In Denver, she met ramp agents who talked about the challenge of staying courteous through sub-zero mornings. In Miami, she joined gate staff juggling hurricane season delays and weary travelers. In Seattle, she spent dawn alongside ground support crews, listening to their suggestions for improving communication between flight and ground teams. Everywhere she went, she asked one simple question: what barriers do you face when treating every passenger with dignity? The answers flowed: unclear policies, inconsistent training, and the pressure to stay on schedule no matter the cost. Evelyn took notes, promising to address each point. Back at corporate headquarters in Atlanta, her childhood home turned gleaming glass tower, Evelyn convened a town hall gathering of all administrative and operational staff. She opened by recounting the near misstep on Flight 217, the moment she had almost been forced from her seat. She emphasized that while that event had been painful, it had sparked a critical reckoning. If we allow bias to guide our actions, we betray every passenger who trusts us with their lives. A hush fell, then erupted into applause. A young black flight attendant raised her hand to share how she had endured subtle slights in the cabin without knowing where to turn. Evelyn heard her voice crack as she spoke, then reassured her. No one should ever feel too afraid to raise their hand. We are creating safe pathways for every crew member and passenger to speak up. Stand with us and we will stand with you, Evelyn declared. her voice carrying the promise of protection and solidarity. The room rose to its feet, a surge of unity that washed through the hall. News of Evelyn's leadership began to circulate beyond the airport. Tabloids splashed sensational headlines. Black woman secretly buys major airline, shocking in-flight showdown. But Silverwing's public relations team reframed the narrative. They issued a statement affirming Evelyn Parker's commitment to respect, acknowledging the serious incident that prompted a full cultural overhaul, and highlighting new initiatives to foster inclusion. Evelyn granted one carefully crafted interview to a respected business magazine, stating plainly, "I had a personal experience that underscored the need for improvement. We are moving forward with accountability and compassion." Within months, the response was striking. Passengers began sharing testimonials on social media about the warmth of newly trained crews and the clarity of feedback channels. A hashtag, Silverwing Respects All, trended among frequent flyer communities. Internally, Silverwing's employee engagement scores rose by nearly 20%, while discrimination complaints fell by 75%. Evelyn watched those numbers climb and felt a deep sense of affirmation that real change was underway. Carlotta herself became a focal case study in the training modules, anonymized but vividly illustrated. She completed weeks of workshops on microaggressions, bias recognition, and empathetic communication. Each session hammered home the notion that a single wrongful act could erode a lifetime of trust. Halfway through, she confessed to her coach that she had never truly grasped how her assumptions about a passenger's appearance could hurt another person so deeply. The admission brought tears, but also a determination to do better. Evelyn made a personal visit to the training center's reflection room, a peaceful space adorned with plants and soft lighting. She found Carlotta seated, shoulders slumped but eyes bright with resolve. Carlotta offered a tentative smile and said, "I am ashamed of my behavior. I am grateful for the chance to learn and grow." Evelyn placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Change happens when we face our shadows," she replied calmly. "You have learned the lesson. We will discuss your return to duty when you demonstrate consistent, respectful actions." In the months that followed, Evelyn instituted quarterly town halls where employees could share experiences and suggest improvements. She launched a confidential incident reporting app, allowing crew and passengers alike to flag misconduct without fear. Senior leaders began receiving performance metrics tied not only to financial results, but also to passenger satisfaction scores and the absence of discrimination reports. She spearheaded uniform changes that accommodated diverse cultural and religious attire. She even introduced a scholarship program for underrepresented youth aspiring to aviation careers, an initiative that spread goodwill and built pathways for new talent. 1 year after that fateful flight, Evelyn quietly tested the system she had built. She boarded Silverwing Flight 538 from Atlanta to Chicago, this time using her real name but revealing nothing of her role. A flight attendant named Sarah Bennett greeted her with a genuine smile, offered a hot towel, and engaged in polite conversation about the weather and their respective hometowns. Every passenger in first class, varying in age, race, and background, received the same attentive service. Evelyn let herself relax, leaning back as the jet climbed above the clouds. In that moment, she felt triumphant. The airline she had saved from its own biases had become the place she had imagined. Mid-flight, she asked Sarah if Carlotta was still with the company. Sarah nodded and said she had been reassigned to a different route after completing her training. She spoke kindly of Carlotta's growth, a testament to the power of education over retribution. Evelyn's heart warmed at the thought that even the most hardened skeptic could change with the right support. When the plane landed in Chicago, Evelyn slipped a short note into the cabin crew feedback box near the cockpit door. "Exceptional hospitality from Sarah Bennett and the first-class team today. Thank you for making every passenger feel welcome." That simple gesture felt like the perfect bookend to her journey. In the terminal, local managers showed her a newly renovated lounge, bright and inviting, with a sign proclaiming "All are welcome at Silverwing." The passenger board displayed multiple crowded Silverwing flights, a clear sign of the airline's newfound reputation for courtesy. Evelyn breathed in the bustle of travelers and staff moving with purpose and pride. As she stepped into a waiting car, Evelyn reflected on how a moment of hate had kindled a movement of kindness. She whispered to herself, "May we continue to soar higher together." Then she turned her gaze to the horizon of Chicago's skyline, knowing that this was only the beginning of Silverwing's story, reflections and life lessons. In the aftermath of her ordeal, Evelyn Parker distilled her experience into practical lessons for anyone facing or witnessing injustice. With clarity and warmth, she shared these insights. Patience and composure in the face of wrongdoing is powerful. By staying calm, Evelyn was able to gather evidence, engage allies, and craft a strategic response that ultimately led to meaningful reform. Use whatever influence you have to promote equity. Whether you lead a multinational company or serve in a small nonprofit, your voice matters. Advocate for fair hiring, inclusive policies, and transparent grievance procedures. Balance accountability with compassion. Immediate dismissal may feel satisfying, but offering space for genuine growth can yield lasting change. Evelyn chose to suspend Carlotta and require training, setting a precedent of restorative justice. Solidarity amplifies justice. When fellow passengers spoke up, an older white man, a woman of color, even a shy seatmate, their voices sent a clear signal that bias would not be tolerated. Together we are stronger. Take personal responsibility to educate yourself and others about unconscious bias. Read books like How to Be an Anti-Racist, attend workshops, and engage in open dialogue with family and friends. Small steps taken consistently can reshape culture. Speak up when you witness injustice. If you see unfair treatment, in a store, on a bus, or in a meeting, document it, report it, and offer your support to the target. Courageous bystanders can turn isolated incidents into collective calls for reform. In your workplace, back diversity and inclusion initiatives. Suggest policy improvements. Join employee resource groups, and mentor colleagues from underrepresented backgrounds. In your community, volunteer with civil rights organizations or donate to legal aid funds that support discrimination cases. Every act of service strengthens the social fabric. Finally, remember that true leadership is rooted in empathy. Evelyn's journey reminds us that holding power carries the responsibility to lift others rather than dominate them. Evelyn ended her message with a heartfelt invitation. If this story moved you, please click like and share to spread the message that inclusion triumphs over prejudice. Subscribe so you never miss an inspiring journey that shows how ordinary people can spark extraordinary change. And most importantly, carry these lessons into your daily life. Stand up, speak out, and build a world where every flight, every meeting, and every encounter is marked by respect and hope. Wishing you safe travels in your own journey toward justice. Until next time, may compassion guide your path, and may you always fly with dignity.